Okay, welcome to our last Committee of Adjustment meeting for 2022. If you do have a cell phone, I'm going to ask you to double check it now to be sure the ringer is turned off. And for members of the public who are with us this evening, if you have an interest in any particular application, please be sure to fill your name and address on the sign-up sheets that are located at the back of the room. So I'll now read the following notice. The notice of decision for the applications we review this evening will only be forwarded to those who have either presented a written request for the decision or to those who have recorded their names on the sign-up sheets at the back of the room. Furthermore, a formal request is necessary to be advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on these matters and in order to be allowed to make a presentation to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is otherwise known as the OLT. If you are following remotely and you'd like to be notified of any decision or any appeals that may result, please send an email to our Secretary Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. Thanks. Please be sure to put your full name and address and the file number of the application. So I'd like to share with you now the 5-part format that I'm going to be using as we navigate through each application this evening. In the first part, I'm going to introduce the application. So if you are the applicant or the agent, I'm just going to ask you to come up here to my right to the speakers area. I'm going to ask you to state your name and your address for our record, and then you'll have an opportunity to add anything further to your application. In step number 2, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of the applicant, their agent, or staff. And then in the third step, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Now, members who of the public can either line up at the speaker's center to the right, or you can raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And when I recognize you, I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions or make your comments. Now, each speaker will be allotted 5 minutes, and I'll be sure to give a warning at the 4-minute mark. It'll be helpful if speakers do not repeat the same issues, so if somebody has already covered a point that you want to raise, then please don't feel compelled to repeat that. That's just not very helpful. So during this portion as well, don't expect an immediate response, because it's at this point we'll physically be recording your questions and comments, and it's only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, their agent, or staff. Now, to be sure, I'll be calling 3 times for public comments before I close the public portion of the meeting. In step number 4, I'll give the applicant, their agent, or staff members to address those public comments we just heard. And then, in step number 5, I turn it over to the committee and we deliberate on the application and make an ultimate decision. I'll be using the same format for every application this evening. And that's about it. So at this point, I'd like to call on Ian, our committee clerk, to confirm quorum. Ian?
Good evening through you, Mr. Chair. I can confirm we do indeed have quorum with no members absent. I also can confirm we do have members of staff on the Zoom and in person, and we also have members of the public present in the chamber, and we have 1 attendee in the public viewing gallery on Zoom. Happy to turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I'll now call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. and I'll refer you to the agenda, committee members. Now, there were 2 addendums. One went out on Friday and one this afternoon around 1 o'clock. Did everybody receive those addendums? Okay, so I'm asking for a motion to approve the agenda with the addendums. Moved by Paul and seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? I see none. So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, now we're looking for confirmation of the minutes of the November 21st meeting. Everybody's received them. Can I call for a motion to approve? So moved by Greg, seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? No, so all in favor, raise your physical hands. And that would be 5, raise your physical hands. That would be 5, unanimously carried. Thank you very much. There are no delegations. Oh, sorry, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? I see none, so we'll move on. There are no delegations, we have no requests for deferral, and we have no returning deferred items. So we're on to our first piece of new business, which is number 8A, which is an application for minor variance. Lindsay, can I please have you read this into the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 768 Princess Street. The file number associated with the application is D13061-2022. Ricardo Pecci will give a presentation on behalf of the city for this application.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Ricardo.
Okay. I am receiving help from clerics. Thank you. Oh, I'll stop fighting. All right. There we go. All right, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm presenting an application for minor variance at 768 Princess Street. The purpose of the application is to formalize a temporary patio with a permanent raised deck in the front yard of the brewery and restaurant on site. The property is located at the corner of Princess Street and MacDonnell Street in the Williamsville neighborhood. And contains a commercial plaza. The proponent is Daft Brewing, who has operated the existing patio for about 3 years. And the existing temporary patio is not subject to front yard setbacks. However, the proposed formalized patio is. So the requested variance is for the front yard setback for the deck. The proposed setback is 1 meter. And the requirement is 3 meters in the Williamsville Main Street zone. The proposed deck is to front onto Princess Street, taking place of the existing temporary patio, as you can see here. And here you can see conceptual sketches of the proposed deck. The planters are to be integrated into the deck and are to be retained within that 1 meter or outside, excuse me, of that 1 meter setback from the sidewalk. The deck is to be slightly raised off the ground to be a consistent height with the existing concrete porch. All public notification requirements were met regarding this application. We have received no public correspondence with regards to the application. And as detailed in the report presented to the committee, the application meets the 4 tests to approve a minor variance as outlined in the Planning Act. It is staff's recommendation to approve the application subject to the proposed conditions. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have the applicant here? Can I call on the applicant to address yourself by name and address?
I'm here virtually, Adam Rondo,
Okay.
and address, I guess, 768 Princess Street, Kingston, Ontario, K7L1G3.
Great, thanks and welcome, Adam. Is there anything further you want to add to the application we have before us?
I don't think so, unless there was any issues that I could address if there was any concerns brought up, but I think that was pretty clearly outlined.
Okay, so we'll drill down into that. All right, so next I'll call on committee members. Do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? I am seeing a bunch. Oh, Blaine? Just tap the button on the base.
There it goes. Okay. Just a question through you, Chair, to the staff. Has there been any operational problems during this temporary approval of the patio? Because I think if you've had operational problems, we should look at that, but just a question. before you formalize this.
Yeah, good question. All right, staff, Ricardo?
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, the application was circulated to various departments. The only aspect that came up was the planter boxes, and it was recommended that those be outside of that 1 meter setback so that they don't interfere with snow clearance. That's about all.
Questions or comments, committee members? None, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us this evening to speak to the application for 768 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom or let yourself be known in council chambers. Do we have anybody with us wishing to speak to the application for 768 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. One person? Oh, there's 0 people. Okay, and third and final call. Is anybody here with us this evening to speak to the application for 768 Princess? I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So it's moved by Paul and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion? No, none. So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that is unanimously carried. Thanks, Adam. You can go.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. All right, our next application is number 8B, which is an application for minor variance. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13-069-2022 at 42 Wellington Street. Tim Fisher will give the presentation for this application.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Tim.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we have a application, or actually the applicant is proposing to reduce the minimum interior setback to construct a partial second story at the southwest corner of the existing 1.5 story dwelling. Next slide here, please. The subject property is designated as residential in the official plan as Zone Heritage District 3, which is Old Sydenham, in zoning bylaw number 2022-62, and the property is developed with a 1.5 story single-family dwelling and a shed. The property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. An application file number P 18-100-2022 has been submitted for heritage approval. Next slide. The photo that you see is the area that they wish to construct the second story. So that would give you some context. However, the reduction is not along the wall that you see. It's actually along the portion behind that fence. So the requirement is 1.2 meters from the side lot line, and they are proposing 0.06 meters. So they are requiring a variance for 1.14 meters. So the view that you do see there is actually the rear lot line. However, it just gives you a good idea of where they're proposing the addition. Next slide. Let's see here. So the dwelling existed since 1953, and it actually has legal non-complying status as it was built prior to the passing of the current bylaw. The addition will be constructed on the existing building footprint, so it will be no closer to the lot lines than what currently exists right now. The addition will, obviously will be no closer is what it is. Next slide. So I have highlighted here where the variance would be sought for. So as you could see, that one wall, which is behind the fence, that's where we would be reducing down to 0.06 meters. So the roof line on the addition will be no higher than the existing dwelling and will not result in any runoff, as the roof will be sloped to the eastern portion of the property, so within the interior of the property. The second story addition will not be visible from Gore Street and will not have any impacts to the character of the street or traffic. The scale and massing of the proposal is in keeping with the existing residential development in the neighborhood. Let's see, next slide. And as you can see here, the roof line will not be higher than the existing building itself, so it would not be visible from the roads. The applicant, it's also important to note that the applicant is proposing to construct a 6.82 square meter vestibule along the eastern wall of the dwelling. However, that actually complies with all the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Next slide. Public meeting notification was provided by advertisement in the forms of signs posted on the subject site 10 days prior to the meeting. In addition, notices were mailed to a total of 49 property owners within 60-meter radius of the property. And a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston Whig Standard. Next slide. So the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw. The proposal is desirable and appropriate development for the land. Therefore, the proposal meets all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act. Approval of this application will provide additional living space to an existing single detached dwelling through the construction of the partial second story addition for future owners. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll leave it in your hands.
Great, thanks very much, Tim. So can I call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please? Yeah, so if you want to come right over here and just tap the mic on.
I'm Mark Peabody. I represent the applicant.
Sorry, oh, Mark, yes.
It's a bit finicky.
Is it? Oh, I had to hit it.
Your man, turn it on again, and you just have to make sure it's all red.
There you go.
There you go, perfect.
That's good.
That's good.
Okay.
Mark Peabody and your
Mark
address?
Peabody. I represent the applicant.
Okay. And address for the record?
66 Earl Street.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. Is there anything further you want to add to the application this evening?
No, I'm just here for any questions that the committee may have.
Perfect. All right, on that note, committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Peabody or staff? And I see Blaine.
Is this also going through for heritage approval at the same time?
Good question.
Yes, it's had heritage approval.
It has heritage approval?
Yes.
Or can we have confirmation of that, sorry?
Tim, can you comment on that? Do we have heritage approval already?
Yes, it actually went to council on December 6th.
Okay. Great, thanks. Any other questions from committee members? I see none, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who would like to speak to the application for 42 Wellington Street? Please raise your hand or raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Okay, there's nobody in the public. Is there anybody here this evening wishing to speak to this application? None? Okay, so everybody's shaking their head no, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Blaine, seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Everybody says no, so all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, our next application is number 8C, which is an application for minor variance for 332 McDonnell. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Next is an application for minor variance at 332 McDonnell Street. The file number is D13022-2022, and I will give the presentation for this one.
Thanks. Well, and welcome.
Thank you. So the purpose of this application is to increase the maximum building depth and to decrease the aggregate interior setback provisions to permit the construction of a new detached dwelling house on the property. Next slide, please. So here we have the key map and should have the neighborhood context map pop up there for reference. 332 Macdonell Street is zoned UR5 in zoning bylaw 2022-62. Next slide, please. The minimum required aggregate interior setback in the bylaw is 3.6 meters, and the applicant has requested to reduce this to 2.7 meters. The second variance is to increase the maximum building depth from 18 meters to 18.6 meters. Next slide, please. So I've included these renderings to provide some context. It's worth noting that this proposal has a unique front configuration, that the second floor projects further forward than the ground floor. You can see that best on the top two renderings here. And basically what that means is that the front yard setback is actually measured to the second floor wall rather than the foundation wall as we would typically see. And also the required parking space for this proposal is to be located partially underneath the second floor. Next slide, please. So here I've got a simplified site plan just to illustrate the required variances. The red line you see is the outline of the foundation, while the blue box underneath it is the footprint of the existing house for reference. Macdonell Street is on the right-hand side of the screen here. The first variance is shown with two blue lines. That's the aggregate interior setback calculated by adding the smallest setback on the north side to the smallest setback on the south side. In this case, the total requested aggregate is 2.7 meters. Each side yard still complies with the individual minimum, which is 0.6 meters. And it's worth noting that the proposed new aggregate interior setback will provide for a net improvement over the existing. The existing aggregate setback is only 2.3 meters for the existing house shown with the blue footprint there. The second variance is just the yellow line down the middle. The extra half meter in building depth is requested at the rear of the proposed house. And you can see at the rear of the house, the side yard setback is actually increased to help mitigate any impact of the additional depth. And at the rear portion of the house there, the building does comply with the minimum aggregate side yard setback. And I've also just included a green line on the front of the house here to demonstrate the proposed front yard setback. That green line marks the second floor overhang front wall. Next slide, please. Okay, so we posted a sign, mailed the notice, and a courtesy ad was in the newspaper. We did receive one public comment on this file, which was included in the second addendum that went out to you today. This came from 336 Macdonell, that's the neighbor on the north side, and the letter indicated concerns that a house with a larger footprint may cause flooding. I'll just point out that one of our recommended conditions, that's condition number 2 in Exhibit A, addresses this concern by requiring that the applicant demonstrate that there will be no adverse impacts on neighboring properties due to drainage or grading before a building permit can be issued for the new house. And the applicant has also submitted a grading plan with this proposal that was reviewed to the satisfaction of our engineering departments. Next slide, please. So in summary, the planning department recommends approval of this application subject to proposed conditions. And I'll leave this in your hands, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks very much, Lindsay. Now, do we have the applicant with us this evening? Yeah, if you could come up over here to the speaker's corner. And as usual, we'll get you to hit that mic on And just identify yourself by name and address, please.
Hi, Luke Kaufman, 332 Macdonell Street.
332. Okay, thanks and welcome to Committee of Adjustment. Is there anything further you want to add to the application we have before us?
No, we uploaded, like Lindsay said, I uploaded when we got the comment from the neighbor, I did take out this section from our landscape architect submission, just specifically to the hydrology of the site that takes care of the flooding concerns, so.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Kaufman? I see none, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 332 Macdonell Street? There's nobody here, and the only two people here are shaking their heads no. Okay, so I'm actually going to come back. I do have a question for staff, for you, Lindsay. It's about the archaeological assessment. Now, on page 71 of the report, recommendation number 4 is a recommendation for an archaeological clearance. However, on page 65, we just go back a couple of pages here. It says, if the site is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, and so on and so forth, but it says the subject property is not designated. So I guess my question is, why do we have the requirement for the archaeological clearance?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Those are two separate classifications. So a property can be designated heritage under the Heritage Act, which would trigger the need, for example, a heritage permit or a heritage impact statement. The archaeological requirements comes from our archaeological master plan and archaeological mapping, which is also in the official plan. And that's a different category where something might have limited potential or a higher potential for archaeology. And the requirement for an archaeological study comes from that mapping layer, and it's not tied to the heritage mapping.
Not at all. So did this property then, it's safe to say, it did show up on that plan?
Yes, it does have composite archaeological potential, which our heritage department has determined is triggering the need for archaeological clearance.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you. And just incidentally, did they visit the property? Do you know?
I don't believe they've done a site visit. They make the review based on the mapping in the official plan.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I have no other questions unless committee members do. None? Okay, so we close the public portion of the meeting. We'll come back to our deliberation. Can I have a look for a motion? So moved by Blaine and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion on this? I see none. So all in favor, raise your hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, our fourth piece is an application. Thank you. This was on the addendum, so it's an application for a minor variance. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our last application for tonight is an application for minor variance, file number D13058-2022 at 1363 Ottawa Street. Sarah Oldenburger will give the presentation for this application.
Great. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and through the chair. This is an application for minor variance at 1363 Ottawa Street. The purpose and effect of this application is to construct a rear uncovered deck which exceeds the maximum surface area provision for decks greater than 1.2 meters above finished grade. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the west end of Kingston, southeast of the intersection of Westbrick Road and Creekford Road, and is located on Ottawa Street just east of Layden Avenue. Next slide, please. A variance to the maximum surface area for decks with a height greater than 1.2 meters is required to facilitate the proposal. The variance requested is for an additional 5.3 square meters. Next slide, please. Shown here is the site plan drawing, which is included in Exhibit H of the report. The site plan shows the proposed rear deck and exterior stairs. It's a little small, but it's there. Next slide, please. Shown here is the south elevation, which details the proposed rear deck and set of stairs. So that would be facing to the south. Next slide, please. Here are the west and east elevations, which show the deck and stairs from the side lot lines. Next slide, please. And finally, here is the floor plan, which shows the proposed deck and stairs with further information on measurements. Next slide, please. One sign was posted on the property, 47 notices were mailed out, and an ad was placed in the Kingston Standard. No comments have been received regarding this application. Next slide, please. The proposal meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act and is being recommended by staff for approval, subject to the proposed conditions in Exhibit A. Approval of this application will allow for the construction of a rear uncovered deck with an area of 35.3 square meters that has a height over 1.2 meters. I believe that the applicant, Mike, is here to answer any questions as well. I'm here as well to answer any further questions you may have. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So on that note, do we have the applicant here with us? So if you could just take the seat, please. Just hit the mic and we'll get you to declare your name and address.
Hi, my name is Mike Matson and my address is 313 Donnell Court, Kingston.
Okay, thanks and welcome. Is there anything further you want to add to the application?
No, Sarah covered pretty much most of it. It was all presented in the slides as far as the design goes and sort of what the proposed design is of the deck we're trying to put there, so.
Sure. Okay, great. All right, so committee members, do you have any questions for Sarah or for the applicant? And I see a bunch of shaking no heads. So I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us this evening willing to speak to the application for 1363 Ottawa Street? And everybody's shaking their head no, and there's nobody in the public gallery. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? No discussion. So all in favor, raise your physical hands. And that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to item number 9 of the agenda. We have no motions. We have no notices of motions. There's no other business. The correspondence we did receive today, which is part of the addendum. Date of the next meeting is Monday, January 16th. So now we're looking for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Greg and seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? So, yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for this last term and for staff. You guys have been phenomenal and have run the meetings very smooth. Staff have been great in responding to questions, so thank you very much for all your time and effort. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you for that, and I echo that with staff. They've just been an absolute dream to work with in every way, both on the planning and on the clerk side. So thanks for making it a great transition, and actually a nice transition back to people time. So thanks. All right, so all in favor of adjournment, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. So meeting adjourned at 6:03 p.m. Thanks, everybody, and Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays.